domestic violence and such things, people don't actually think of what's going on in a person's head, or why they actually feel comfortable doing these type of things, or why initially it starts as one-off, but that is a pattern that the person created from before, and what is the thoughts that that person is having that makes them feel okay to do that. So we look at it from a slightly, the spirit within the person and how, what's making that happen, and also the fear within the person that's allowing it to happen. So we try and take it as far as we can to look for an answer as to what's actually taking place, and not just say, okay, they'll heal in time, because time doesn't heal such things.
Hi, my name is Nigel. Where should I start? Well, basically, I witnessed domestic violence as a child. In fact, I abused myself as a child. I'm trying to stop. Sorry, my father abusing my mother. I'm the author of a book about relationships. I manage, along with other teams, 2 Facebook groups for survivors of abusive relationships. We've got a combined membership of about 30,000 people at the moment. My future in the movie Looking for Love, so check it out. And I'm currently working on a book about abusive relationships, which hopefully be published at the end of July.
Okay, so does anybody want to, sorry? Okay. Oh, sorry. There is the chairperson.
Thank you very much, President.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, my name is Dave, and what it is, I'm a former youth worker. I also deal with personal development, and I've also been involved in the music industry and been responsible of developing specific artists in the field. I currently work in the field of the people with learning difficulties, trying to help them and support them, look at positive solution with their life and get them back in everyday life support. Okay? That's a bit about me.
Yeah, chairperson.
Hold on. We're going to continue. Everybody has a chance. The woman wanted to know a little bit about myself, so I'm just giving an introduction, just like yourself. All right?
All right.
So let's behave now. Okay, let's continue now.
Something nice deal, right? There's the chairperson, right? No, this, does anybody have a burning question to raise in terms of whatever, like domestic violence, abuse? Because we really want to go into tone. So anybody got a burning question, put your hand up, and they will send the mic to you. In fact, don't want to go around the circle. No, the sister, I want you to do a runner for me. If you can, the mic runner? You do the mic runner? Oh, come. Okay then. Okay.
So your questions, people, assist up here. If you could say your name, please.
Hi, I'm Sandra. Hi.
Hi, Sandra.
I think just it's more like reflections on what you've already said, really. I mean, Nigel said that he was writing a book about abusive relationships, and I just think, I'm sure that's the correct title. That's the title. You know, lots of us say abusive relationships or whatever, but I think even in saying those words, abusive relationships, you almost give some level of validity to that, because it's kind of abusive relationships. It's almost like it's a type of relationship, when actually it's about an individual abusing, assaulting, sometimes murdering. You know, you'll have the statistics much more than I will. Murdering another individual. It's not necessarily a challenge to what you say. I know why you say that, and I say it myself, but I think sometimes we have to think about the language that we're using, because sometimes we can give validity to something which isn't valid, and I know that's not what you were trying to do, because I'm in your raw group, so I know a little bit about, you know, maybe where you're coming from, but I think sometimes the language. And then Edison, you said something quite interesting about the sort of spiritual context context of this. And I almost, again, it's just a conversation piece. I almost got the impression that maybe what you were really saying is that, well, I don't know, you can tell me, but I interpreted what you said as almost that sometimes when someone is perpetrating these acts, what you said made me think that maybe we were taking some of the responsibility away from them, and it was something to do with the spiritual context of the ancestral spirits within that individual, and that worries me just a little bit because of the idea that maybe they're not responsible. Then we could come to that as a conclusion that they're not responsible. It's actually the spirit within. They are maybe possessed. I don't know, but I think there's a real conversation to be had there. And then, you know, my last point, Nigel, I mean, it's what I said to Dougie this morning. Many of us as children, certainly I personally come from as a child, you know, witnessing, seeing things that I ought not to have seen and experienced and witnessed between my own parents. And so I think actually this is a massive challenge for many of us who maybe have grown up within the context of domestic violence. Because it's kind of like, so where else do we learn what is a positive and loving relationship? I think a lot of us are kind of traumatized by that experience, and that then impacts on, you know, how we relate to other people in these so-called abusive relationships.
Okay, can I take you over to Nigel so you could ask? Can I just say, great points, but we have maybe 1 or 2 points just to keep the time tight, and can we look at more of solutions? Let me put you over to.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your comments. In terms of terminology, abusive relationship, well, you need to look up the term. What does the term abuse mean? What does the terminology of domestic violence mean? Because at the end of the day, what other words, what terms are you going to use? If someone comes up to you, as a friend says that my partner's abusing me, you would then have to expand on that and say, well, what did he or she do? But you have an idea it's not a good thing. You have an idea it's not positive. It's whether it's psychological, physical, financial, sexual. There's all different types of abuse. So you have to quantify as in terms of, okay, what type of abuse is going on. But I haven't got, personally myself, I haven't got a problem with the terms abuse or domestic violence because I understand what they describe. Generally.
Right. She's going to get the feedback. What are you saying now?
Oh, no.
You're fine, okay.
I
All right.
absolutely accept what you're saying. I know you said it. I say it.
Can I hear you? Right. Yeah? Right, all right. Let me go to listen now.
Okay, on the question of possession, see, the problem is, most of us, whenever we're completing a thought within our mind, we don't appreciate the process and the steps we take. We have a situation where first we hear a word in our head, we say it to ourselves, and then we build a picture with that word we hear in ourselves. We say, first we say a word, then we build a picture, then we discuss that picture with us. So before we actually say anything, we have a little conversation within ourselves to say, what are we going to say in response to that? The problem that you have is, if you have within you certain, we say energies, it's hard to explain in a nutshell because this is something which I do a class where we go through all these different steps together where you explain what an entity is, how it actually communicates within you, and how all the time most of us are fighting different voices or suggestions in our head. All the time we're saying, do this, do that, this person spoke to you, why are you accepting that, this person spoke to you. So we have all these different voices in our head all the time trying to convince us what we should do next. Now, more often than not, we're strong enough to put aside the slightly more aggressive suggestions saying, say something back to that person, hit that person. But not everyone is strong enough to do that. And have people that give in to the suggestions that come in their mind. Something says, abuse that person, go on, say something back to them, and that person then gives in and completes that act. A lot of the time. So yeah, as far as the thing is about domestic abuse as well, in respect to that, is that this is someone who has essentially found a way to feed, because all we're often doing is appeasing certain thoughts that we have in our head when we're constantly hearing something. Do this, do that, do this, do that. It's hard to separate the spirit from the person, because everyone's looking at the person's physical body and saying, that's who you are. Well, that's actually the shell which is being used by the intelligence of that person within them. The body doesn't speak, it's the intelligence within the body that gets that body to utter some words. So effectively, all of us are working from a possession of our own self, controlling our body and making us speak and making us communicate. So in the act of someone who is literally lost in themselves and acting according to the more aggressive thoughts that they have, they're looking for someone who they can do that to and still stay with that person. So again, in that situation, is the person possessed? All of us are slightly possessed all the time. All of us are fighting these different voices, giving us certain suggestions. And the one who's actually abusing someone else is someone who's just given up and allowed every negative thought that they have in their head, and they're just acting out on them without trying to hold it back or say, no, I can't do that. The fight of good and evil is within yourself.
Shay.
Alright, that's fine. Okay, we wound up now. Now we're going to go on to the next question. Okay?
Sorry, I understand everything that you
Can you
said.
just say your name, sister?
Oh, sorry, my name is Carol. Alright? And I understand what you're saying about the possession and stuff, but I think it's learnt behavior. I firmly believe it's learnt behavior from way back, going back to slavery times, and it's how men treated women or whatever it was. And now it seems to be, people don't speak about it because they don't know who to speak about. And as the lady said, they do isolate you. They isolate you, so it's just in the inner circle and nobody else knows about it, nobody speaks about it, and they're suffering in silence. So these movies and all these things are helping a lot of people. It's not about being possessed. There's a lot of people who have depression and all of other issues that they have to deal with in everyday life. But I feel firmly it is learned behavior that was not challenged. Okay?
Anybody else? Had their hands up for quite a while.
Hold on. What? Eddie, hold on a second. Do you have anything else to say to that?
We both had their hands up for quite a while.
Yeah, one at a time.
I appreciate what you said as far as learned behavior is concerned, but you will find 3 or 4 different children within a family that could have witnessed exactly the same thing, and only one of them chooses to be an abuser. The other 3 decide to behave in a totally different way. So even though they witnessed it, they didn't choose to act on what they saw. So they all learned and saw. So therefore, as much as I do appreciate what you said, that there are aspects and dynamics beyond how a person processes their thoughts. It's not just sadly a case where it's all straightforward. There are other, competitions that we have within our own mind to decide what we do. A good person is someone who can calm their sort of darker thoughts within themselves. Because like you said, a family could be totally 2 brothers and sisters. 2 brothers could be exactly the same, go through the same circumstances and have 2 totally different characters. So it's a choice. It's not necessarily, it is learned that they can choose not to be that way.
It's about strength though.
Well, then that's essentially it. It's the strength of your mind. But then your mind has those thoughts, those tendencies. Road rage, you could choose to walk away or get out and beat the other person. It is your choice. But sometimes you let it go, you let go and let that thought that says do it, and you go and do it.
Before we go on to the next question, I just want to bring in the female panel, please. Do you have anything else to say on the subject, Sister Fred?
I just think when it comes to abusive partners, whether it be male or female, that being abusive as it comes from them seeing it taking place as a child and thinking for them it's the norm to behave that way. And it is for others externally or those who see the person behaving a particular way to approach them as much as it may be embarrassing and talk to them about they need to change their attitudes and their behaviour, because it's something that if you don't try and nip it in the bud early, or you don't try and deal with it as a teenager, as they're growing, because they will, this behaviour is not a behaviour that only comes out when you get married. It's a behaviour that has been within that child from small. And you as a parent, if you see certain things happening and the way they're behaving, and you're not going to correct the child, whether it be male or female, is automatically going to grow up and believe and think that the behaviour and how they react and interact with other people is the only way to behave. That's my opinion.
There's a couple of things to add. I thought what you were saying about abusive relationships and giving it validity. But isn't it valid though? Who are you giving validity to? Who do you want to be valid? The person being abused or the person abusing? Is it not a fact that it is an abusive relationship? Whether you're giving or receiving, that's just a question, open-ended question, not me to answer. To Edison was talking about spirituality. My take on it is, if there are people who's never experienced one day of domestic violence as a child, who's some of the biggest murderers, and they do the worst harm to people. And it comes down to, their explanation was that they are somewhat spiritual inside of them. I think really, whosoever inside of you, whether it's the bad side ruling or the 50-50 good and evil, whichever side it is, that's the side ruling, that is who the person is. Whatever you put out defines you. So if you decide to be abusive, hence you carry that name. As far as I'm concerned, that is where I stand. But I'm not saying that I'm an expert. All I'm saying, this is my thoughts on it.
Okay. Give a round of applause. Could we take the next person's question and try and keep to the point, and I'm reminding you what the subject matter is. Alright, that's what we're talking about, okay?
Hi there.
Say your name, please.
My name is Sky.
Sky.
Yes.
Sky.
Oh. Hi everyone, I'm Sky. You never mentioned Essex when you were talking about the place in London. Thank you. Domestic violence is a topic, a subject very close and very dear to myself. I've recently just finished the LLB law degree, and domestic violence was an area that we covered. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have a look at like, the legal side and how the law sees domestic violence. And it's just quite rightly, like you've all pointed out, there is no actual definition of domestic violence. It is a pattern of coercive behaviour. There's no single incident, and I find that's what happens like with the law, where there's not like one single instant, like it has to be like, a pattern. And so it's hard to have evidence, like, to prove. But anyway, I'm going into the law on domestic violence. I want to talk about briefly about my experience, and also like, domestic violence. One of the roots of it is when women or men are not having enough self-love. It stems from having no confidence within yourself. When you don't love yourself and you're not, you haven't got no self-esteem within yourself. So you allow someone to, treat you in that way because of the lack of self-love. The minute you look in the mirror and you love who you are, the way how God has made you, you would not subject yourself to you know, a lot of the abuse is abusive pattern that you're in. It's a lot to do with pathology, which I'm sure you was getting at that kind of angle. It's not to do with pathology, but the main root of it is self-love. A lot of these men and women in these abusive relationships, they've forgotten how to love themselves. They've forgotten who they are. They don't know themselves. You know, they've become accustomed to a pattern, and it's getting out of that pattern. It affects children, it affects anyone who's within that circle would have some effect. And that's not limited to just physical abuse, it also is psychological. Psychological abuse we cannot show. We've got scars to show for physical abuse, but psychological abuse, where is the scars? How do we show that? You know, so if someone on the panel was saying about children, of course it affects children. Anyone who has seen domestic violence is going to be affected them somehow. If it's psychologically or physically, they are going to have some kind of effect. But I think workshops like this is amazing, because we need to help our young people get into schools, open up panels and stuff, and have voices and talk about it. It's not something that needs to be put underneath the carpet. It needs to stop. This whole chain, it has to be stopped. And yes, thank you very much for putting this together, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Some very good points, especially like the points about the law, because I've been having to do a lot of research on the legal framework to how survivors or victims can get support. But I wanted to bring up something about you said about self-esteem. Now, yes, an abuser will try and break down the other person's self-esteem, but that's all part of the control pattern. But when you meet an abuser, often abusers are very charming, very sociable, and that's what lures the person into the trap. So it's like the analogy of the frog. They say, if you put a frog in cold water, is it cold water or warm water? If you put it in cold water, it'll stay there. But if you put that frog in cold water and then heat up the water, slowly it will stay in that pot. And it will die. Because to my mind, abusive relationships are very insidious. No one walks up to you and meets somebody new and says, "Oh, I'm an abuser." They don't wear labels on their head. They entice you in.
Can I just counter that? Sorry, sure. That's correct. I agree with your point. They don't do that, but what they do know, they can spot someone with low self-esteem. They can spot someone with no confidence. Take for example, you get a lot of these people, street fundraisers or whatever. They know certain people to stop, and they know people who not to stop. And that is the same with a lot of these abusive men and women, or women. They know someone who has low confidence. There's a look, there's a way they carry themselves. Sorry, I mean, go on now.
I agree with you. I agree with you totally. But anybody can become a victim of abuse, because part of an abuser's strategy is to break down your self-esteem.
Yes.
It's to break down your self-confidence, because essentially abusive relationships are about power and control, and that's what they want. Yeah. So I just get a bit wary when someone says, yes, if you've got low self-esteem, you're more likely to get involved in an abusive relationship. If you've got no self-confidence, yes, you are more likely to. But I just like to say that, I don't want people thinking that, oh, well, because I've got high confidence, I couldn't be a victim. Because anybody can be a victim.
Sister, one of the things you said, the words you used was subject themselves to. Nobody subjects themselves to. That's right. I understand what you're saying. I cannot subject myself to anything like abuse. I don't want to be abused. When I walk out there with my head held high. If you watch that clip, you notice what she said. There was a pattern that happened. He made her feel that she was powerful. That's right. She felt loved. She was secure. She was so sure that she was loved. It's not because she had low self-esteem. No, she just graduated from Harvard. Yeah, she was confident. She was very confident. What they do is that they break you down to nothing. And I can tell you from personal experience, this is what happened. That was my story. I might not have gone to the point where a gun was held to my head, but emotional, financial abuse is worse, and you said it as well, is worse than physical abuse.
I won't say what's better and what's worse. Abuse is abuse, there's no better or no worse, and I appreciate your point, sister, that it's not, and again, I must emphasise, it's not just for women with low self-confidence, but they are sometimes the majority, like you rightly said, who can be subjected. And the reason why you're subjected is because we all have a choice. Do you understand? We all have choices. So if I want to go left or right, it's my choice. If I choose not to, then I'm subject myself to go another way through my choice. That's what I meant. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your point. Thank you.
See, the thing about abuse is that each individual decides what is abuse to them. Someone who is actually the abuser could claim that the person is abusing them by the way they're actually acting towards them. So you have a situation where each person is literally acting out according to how they feel about the other person. You have it also that the abuser feeds off the other person's reaction towards them. They feed off their fear. The way they raise themselves up is by putting that person down. You'll find that they'll find someone who's even, they believe mentally that person is better than them, smarter than them. So they take pleasure out of putting that person down and making that person feel insecure so that they can gain some sort of power within themselves. So the actual term abuse here is a funny one because each party can decide that they're the ones who are actually being abused. And physical abuse is the last stage. Yeah, because initially, of course, the person, as we say, is inspiring, saying all these different things about you. Then it becomes insults, when they can't actually control you by being inspiring. Because all they want to do is have you in a state of control, where effectively you can feed them the idea of what they think about you. Most people fall in love with the idea of a person. They create this sort of image of what this person is, and they feed off that idea. Once that image starts to break, the person starts saying, hold on, that food isn't as good. What can I do to maintain that food at that same frequency? So what they tend to do, when the person is talking to other people, seem to have interest outside of them, they want to contain all of that. So that person is there to feed them the exact image that they have, what makes them happy. Then all the controls, the restraints, everything comes in, because all they want to do is break the spirit of that person, so that person would never ever conceive of going against them and denying them their food. You have it also often because, again, men are always seen in that way, but you have the subtle ones where women may put a guy down all the time and find a partner that really adores them, worships the ground, and they treat him like a doormat. Do this, do that. That's abuse, but it's never regarded as abuse because essentially there's no physical interaction taking place. And even there's times where she may hit him and beat him, but not damage him to that point. And every time that transpires, she'll say she'll never do it again. She'll cry, she'll say all kind of things, convince the guy that won't happen. But this happens to men all the time. Again, not spoken about because no one wants to think of the man as weak. He doesn't want to say, I'm weak, I let this woman take control of me and abuse me. But there's many women that don't even think that's abuse. They'll just say the man is weak. Because what abusers always do is blame the other person for not stopping them. Yeah?
Before we move on to the next question. Fine. Did you have something to say? Say your name. Stand up. And you're not from Essex, by the way. All right.
Hi, good evening. I'm Curtis, East London. My question is, Elijah Muhammad once said, if you educate a woman, you educate a family. Now, the problem is that apparently what our problem I see with our community is that we need really to have our own schools, because that's the only way we're going to educate ourselves, because we're taking on an identity that is alien to us, and we're taking on a European identity where we need to get back to our Africanness. That's where I see the problem comes. And I just want my question to the panel, how would you educate the necessity of our people going forward rather than the blame culture?
How do we educate our people? Education, our first port of call for education comes from within the home.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Thank you.
And when I say from the home, if as a couple being abused, bringing forth children and expecting that those children are going to grow and go forth into the world and, you know, do whatever they need to do to create the world in which we're living in. It's a very vicious cycle, and I wouldn't even call it it's an easy answer or a question that you can answer straight off. Because once you were saying it, I was actually thinking what you were saying, or how do you go about addressing. And one of the points in addressing that is exactly what we're doing right now, and it is to talk about it, share that information and knowledge, and then tell our children, get our children involved, and tell them that certain behaviours and practices that people may cultivate within a relationship is not acceptable, because if you don't try and advise and correct, then that cycle will continue to go on, and it will be then passed on continuously. So when we say to educate, to help our people move forward and not blame, whose responsibility is it, in the sense of how do we go about finding the answer to the questions that are put out there? Why do people feel they need to? Yes, because they're feeling inferior or insecure in themselves, and yes, they do get off on, you know, making another person feel inferior, but at the same time, what emotion is going through them when they're doing this to another person? I'm quite sure they're not actually feeling quite great with themselves, and that's why I think they just continue to do the same thing, because the emotion and feeling they were feeling at the time when they were doing what they were doing it's like, as the brother said, it's feeding, they knock off each other. So I think the way forward is to try to break that cycle of emotion that one is feeling to another person when they feel restricted or when they feel that they're not getting their way. I mean, I know it's time, but I mean, there's many ways you can go around trying to break that.
Yes, education begins in the home. Now, the research that I've read, and I've read a lot, says that young girls brought up in a home where they witness abuse are more likely to accept abuse when they become adults. Conversely, boys who grow up witnessing abuse are more likely to become abusers. So, going back to the point that was made earlier, a part of it is learned behaviour, but then you can also, nothing is set in stone. Everyone has free will and free choice, and say free choice, right? You must know what is right and what is wrong. I witnessed my father beating my mother, but I knew that was never right. But I could have gone the other way, you know. So, by educating, I think it's important to be educating everyone, not just us as a people, but everyone, because it can happen to anybody. I keep making that point, and people will say, "Oh, it never happened to me because I'm intelligent and I'm confident, right?" Well, you might have been intelligent and confident at first before you got suckered in, but after you've been broken down over a period of time, you've been brainwashed, you've been financially abused. I know 2 women personally who I know are very intelligent, very confident black women, and they lost everything. And these are women of age. I'm talking about women who are 45 plus, got their own home, got a brilliant job, everything's cool. Guy comes into their life, tells them what they want to hear. Because often the time, what an abuser will do is tell the target what they want to hear. Going back to your point, if you've also suffered from low self-esteem, got no self-confidence, someone rolls up, tells you all you're the best things since sliced bread, suckers ring, before you know it, you're that frog getting cooked. You're really slowly in that pot.
Nigel, you mentioned all that. What are the telltale signs you see when things are happening? I know everybody are individuals in terms of a chemical reaction or signs. Let me put you over. I haven't made it too complicated, but just give an example of the processes for maybe a particular individual. Yeah?
Yeah, predator.
Okay. What you'll tend to find with abusers, again, according to what I've read, many of them have personality disorders. These are people who are basically personality disorders. They have disordered personalities and they have certain traits. Now, one of the traits of an abuser would be love bombing. So love bombing is a term where basically you meet somebody new, they put you on a pedestal, they text you all the time, emailing you all the time, calling you all the time, I want to be with you, they're just intense. And they just keep after you. Until eventually you might say, oh, I'll go out with him or her, because it's not a gender specific thing. But they go after the target, the target, the person, potential victim. Now if you succumb, because you're in a certain mindset, like you said, you might be suffering from low self-esteem, but you might just be lonely. It might even be a self-esteem, self-confidence issue. You might have been single for 6 months, a year, you want to be in a relationship, someone comes along, tells you you're the best thing since sliced bread, and insidiously wheedles their way into your life. You see, the thing with abusers, as I said before, you don't know they're abusers when you first meet them, right? It's just eventually, after they get into your life, then the mask begins to slip off as they begin to exert their control, just begin to put you down, try to break down your self-esteem, break down your self-confidence, break down your self-worth, take control, isolate you. So start telling you who you can talk to, who you can't talk to. Back in the day, you had a group of girlfriends. Every fortnight you go to the wine bar, he starts telling you now, oh, you can't go out with your friends. Yeah, it's not even, it's sometimes as overt as that. Because it often starts off very subtly. But love bombing is one of the things that definitely abusers have a pattern of doing. They're coming hard, they're coming fast. Because they want to move, they want to get you into that situation as quickly as they can.
So what is this love bombing?
The microphone.
Not like that, but just the bombarding to get
Did you got that? Is that the answer before we go over? Melvin.
Yeah, perfect. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, panel. Just a couple of things I want to say very quickly, because I'm a coach, I deal with results. Very important, and it's kind of overlooked, I think, in many of our conversations. We talk about the problem, and we don't focus on the solution at all. And the problem is vast, wide, and expansive, and can always be growing. The solutions are probably quite difficult to get to, because the way our brains work, we are very used to things that have happened to us, and so it creates a pattern in our brain. But we're not used to things that haven't happened yet. The brain doesn't really understand a new pathway, and it takes a lot of energy for the brain to think that way. 20% of our brain and 20% of the energy in our body is taken up just in thinking. So when something's on really tired, it's been thinking, they really are like that. It can wear you out, especially if it's a new thought. Just a couple of things. So really, the main thing I wanted to say is just about knowing how the basics of how a brain works. If you just get how a brain works, it gives you access to how your brain works. And when you know how your brain works, let me tell you, you know yourself. Most people do not know the first thing about how the brain works. And if you don't know any of that stuff, it really makes it difficult for you to get yourself out of these situations. Just give a couple of little bits of facts, if I may. There is, from the age of 0 to 10, the latest research in neuroscience says we have a brain plasticity switch, okay, which is in our head, and between 0 and 10, it is almost always on. Now what that means, because this switch is about learning, so we learn at a phenomenal rate, and we pick up everything in the environment. So we learn from our parents, we learn from all caregivers, we learn from schools, from society, from the TV that you watch. You're just learning constantly. So if you're so this is also for the victim, for the abuser as well. They're also learning. So what the sister was saying regarding it being something that happens and it's learned behaviour, it's literally learned in that way. And because if you're watching that from 0 to 10, it's not even consciously, you're not even consciously aware of the fact that it's abuse. If you see your dad, because my dad used to kick my mum all over the place. And it was very painful to watch and see. And just like you, whenever I try to intervene, then I get some licks myself. So between 0 and 10, you just learn, you're just like a sponge, you soak up everything. Between about 10 and 25, you stop, the switch literally switches off and it's almost always off. But what takes over is that the behaviour that you learn between 0 and 10 is now reinforced. So everything that you learn between 0 and 10, so if you went to a house that was happy and carefree, then between 10 and 25, say, you become happy and carefree because you're thinking about those things you learn. If you're in an abusive house, then you believe that that is how it is. You go to school, you hear teachers telling you you're rubbish. Between 0 and 10, between 10 and 25, you think you're rubbish. Your brain is like that, and then that pattern is literally set for the rest of your life. And it needs to be interrupted. We need to know how to interfere, interrupt, and intervene in that patternistic way of thinking. That is the way to break it. I've done loads of work on it, so just with individuals who are abused, I know how to help anybody in that situation.
Right. You mentioned we have to learn about the brain. Is there any books that you can give us titles that we can actually make a start by reading about the brain? Because I know there are quite a few books in personal development that talk about the changing your mindset and things like that. So what books do you recommend that we can go and read?
Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. It's called Switch on Your Brain. An incredible book. In fact, I can give you a couple, so I think you just carry on and I'll give you some titles. They're very straightforward.
Oh, let me get the mic to you so everybody can hear.
Okay, so a really, really simple book that you can read called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And it's by a guy called Jesse Payne. Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. There's also Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. Very simple books to read. I absolutely promise you they will have you much more aware of just how a brain works. When you get that, because then you can use your mind to really empower yourself with your brain. We just don't get that. And then when it comes to making relations, well, the other thing is about relationships just in general and how they start off. The abuser is a victim as well as the abused. The one way in which we can all really begin to make our relationships much more effective is to be really honest at the beginning. It's at the beginning where he comes in, and let's say it's a male predator, and he's what did you say, bombing you? Love bombing you. And you're a female who has been out of, I don't know, circulation for a while. And you get the attention from, you get the attention from that guy. Well, as soon as the relationship begins to even look like it's going to take any form of a seriousness, you start to ask questions and be really honest with each other. Talk about what your needs are, then talk about what their needs are. And we don't spend enough time being really honest about what we really need from each other. We don't communicate with each other. We communicate, as you said, in the story of who we are, not who we are. So if you get something about your brain, you recognize your brain, your emotions, they will lie to you. I mean, bold-faced lie. Anybody says that's rubbish, watch a movie and watch your brain, your emotions take over. Like it's real. And it's not real. Well, life is like that. Life is like a movie. And we see it through almost like a screen, a veneer. And you've got to get that out of the way first. I don't want to say, don't go into a relationship until you know yourself.
Just as you said, yeah? The more you know yourself, the more you can understand someone else.
Thank you.
If you don't have an appreciation of who you are and what's important to you, you're not going to be able to stop someone taking that from you. Okay? So often what we find, especially when you say using your brain, if you appreciate the things that are important to you, yeah, when you start out in a relationship, the thing is you find that because we're looking for love, or I always say you get into a relationship to fall in love with yourself, because the way in which that person treats you, that's how you feel your self-worth is. So when that person comes in at the beginning and starts to tell you all these things, at the beginning, so okay, alright, after a while, you feed into what that person's saying. You're raised by that person's energy and attention towards you. You start to pick yourself up, and after a while, you now need that person to say those things to pick yourself up, to keep you going every day, day in, day out. You'll find someone, because everyone recognizes when someone is over passionate towards you, yeah? Where they say, oh God, it's so much, I need that. And they find that person will defend you or fight to be speaking to you. Oh, you're not talking to me. Why are you not talking to me? Why are you not showing attention to me? This is because they've been feeding off the way in which you've been treating them all that time. When they say a relationship is falling down, it's when you stop treating that person the way you did initially. And this is where the situation comes, where that person now has to fight to get that situation back to how it was, to how you were treating them initially. Often you recognize the person is a bit aggressive in the way that they come towards you, but you let it go, because you say, hold on, this person really loves me. I can let them be aggressive sometimes and don't get too upset because they're doing it, and I appreciate it, but I'll take the rough with the smooth until it gets to the point where there's more rough than smooth. But the thing is, you have the highlights. This is why the beginning of the relationship is the most important part, because the things that happen at that time is what you use to forgive all the stuff that happens in the future. You say, once upon a time, they were like this, they were like that, they were like this. And those memories are what you're playing in your mind all the time when they're behaving awkward or actually treating you badly. So you have a situation where if you really know yourself from the outset, you have to force that person to basically tell you who they are. Watch the signs. Don't take someone's passion for you, and even if they're aggressive towards that, in the way that they do that, as love. Because it's not necessarily love of you. They just want to know that you can give them back that love or treat them the same. Because the first thing abuse is going to say is, you don't love me the same. When it all starts, all the stuff starts to break down, and they feel like you've changed, you don't want to be around them, that's when they start to do things to force you to put fear. Most of us live in fear and hope. Fear and hope. Those two cycles is how we live our life. We hope it's better in the future. We fear it's better. And we fear that it's going to be better. That fear is what we're using all the time to keep us going. So in situations of domestic abuse, when that gentleman said about education, it's difficult because in Africa and in other countries around the world, they subject their women terribly. And if you're teaching the boys, yes, some of them do, but then in Africa, you know, different countries, I'm from Nigeria, in different states, the women have different rights. And even though the man is supposed to, in the olden days, work with a woman to build a life, it's not that situation. More often nowadays, people are competing. They're competing for the other one to love them more, and they do less. That is more what relationships have now become in the West, as opposed to the two people trying to move together as a group in unity. It's not like that anymore. Okay?
Except around the yeah, alright. Melvin just wants to add one more, and then we're going to go on to the next question as we're running for time. Okay? Go on, man. Yeah, he just had one brief thing to add.
Hands up, please.
Yeah.
I want to say something relevant to what he just said.
So could I have something to share? Yeah, sorry. Let them pick it up.
I think you should give somebody who's a chance to talk to you.
I know. Please. Why am I I'm getting
Melvin's got something to add. Alright?
It's just really in terms of when we go into relationships, most people go into a relationship for what they can get. They don't go in to give anything. And when you go into a relationship for what you can get, I absolutely guarantee you're not going to get it. You've got to go in 100% what you can give. It's a giving relationship that always wins. That's where love is. And the other thing, of course, is that we come into a relationship with all our baggage. And that's what we expect the other person to fix. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. I can say so much more.
Right. Right, okay. Order, can we have listen. Can we have order, please? I'm chairing here, okay? I'm chairing here, okay? Order, alright? Okay, alright. Alright, okay. Alright, let's continue, alright? The next person offers up top, and then we go to the judge.
The top, and then
the top.
Alright.
He's changed his mind now.
Greetings, my name is Lyndon. I'm also a coach. I have a niche outlook on coaching, which is different from all other coaching. Not going to knock any other form of coaching because it all helps. Everybody has their own recipe, if you like, for the same food, which is the mind. What I want to say is I've heard so many enriching comments. You know, I'm being enriched in learning by every single comment today. I can see, I'll have to have a word with Brother Dougie, I think it's going to need a part 2. And because I don't think we can all get everything out today. This is a very intense experience for those who have been abused. And I do a lot of conflict resolution. And I want to tell you what I've found. Number one, I agree with the brother about the learning more about the brain and the neuroplasticity and all that, doing the same, doing the research. Yeah? But let me just say this. What I've found as case histories, because I cannot break confidentialities, you'll appreciate that. Yeah? But as case histories I can refer, and I have those people's permission. We are talking here about a generational picture, experience, culture, and tradition. When it was said, as I was a boy then, and James Brown came and said it, this is a man's world! But it wouldn't be the said without a
Woman.
Hallelujah. So there's lots to be said in that. I'm going to leave that for you to look at it at a deeper level. But here's one that comes to mind straight away from back home. Real Jamaican church town talk. Singing and come live with me is two different things. Is that been the experience? Yeah. But that's on only one category. One category. One category. One category of relationship. Relationships have many categories. There's a sibling category. There is also the parental category. There's a social category. There's a professional category. There's intimate category. So we can't just talk about solutions today, my friend, Mr. Chairman. I did hear you say that, and I appreciate it. But we can't just do it like that. It takes more investigation, maybe even a part 3, before we can start talking about solutions. Maybe we let it off, man. Maybe we let it off. I was born and grown in Trenchtown, where my neighbor's string is still under the pitch. You get me? And I was there before Bob came into town, but it's my bedroom still, so it's cool. You understand? But Bob wouldn't stand for this neither. As many times we've had to, as youths, who were told in those days, children should be seen and not heard. Bobby was a fierce man from a barn. I didn't care whether he was adult or posing as an adult. You get me? I didn't care. Because when I see a beating a woman, I'll take up a sword and lick him in your foot. And I said, you don't know, you're not supposed to do that. I said, well, you know what? You're not supposed to hit the woman. But of course, you got the woman to hit the man too. You understand? Because she take the Dutch part and give one to the head and knock the man life out. Till him decide so to go and live in the dog pen with the fleas. Believe me, this is real. Rather than stay inside with the woman. So please understand, it's not a one-way thing. So that's what I want to show. Last bit about the scientific side of things, and I'm glad a good friend there also brought it in. We heard about the legal side and stuff like that. Really nice contribution. Let me tell you what my research says. And I research from 12 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. every day, 24/7, 365, 366 on a leap year like this year. For 32 years. I don't know it all. I'll never know it all. You are the only ones with the answers. You, the ones who are being abused. But sometimes, because of low esteem, low confidence, low self-worth. And me said that worse than low confidence. It's worse than low esteem. Because it's lower than a snake's belly to the ground. And when somebody is in that kind of a mindset, and it haunts them every day, and they don't know whether to commit a crime of passion in order to say to the legal people, well, we couldn't take no more. See that? Somebody just deciphered. Alright, you know it already. You understand? I won't even bother to talk about the violence. But, let me say this. These frameworks of words, we are being abused by the language that we speak. So don't talk to me about this, that, violence, and that. It's just simply violence. Right. And any form of violence must be beaten down. Yes? When some brothers at home call me and say, hey, Bridget, man, why could chick later on, you know, you want back first? You say what? What do you say?
That's what I'm saying.
That's called battery. Back home, anybody who knows anything about that? Yes? We all know it commonly as rape.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah.
I want to tell you something that's part of the culture. Because you can't open the mouth and say nothing in case somebody do you up in the darkness when there's no moonlight out, on a dark night. So let me tell you something, I feel passionately, and I have to give thanks to Brother Dougie and all of you to invite me here today, because it's another stage of learning for me about how much we really care about each other, and that we can bring this platform here so that we may express ourselves and in unity say we have to do something about it. The next thing is to do something about it.
That's right.
Bring the audience in first, right? Then they can.
Taker, there's a reason why.
Thank you, Sister Beverly. I am in an abusive relationship for many years. I didn't know how to deal with it years ago, but it got so bad. I came here and I spoke to a doctor about my ex-partner, and he done a diagnosis, and he went further for an investigation, which I asked, and it came back that a negative spell has been cast upon my partner by a woman he once loved, and it went into some very horrible things that my partner will experience. And I was very interested in the man in the white t-shirt, whether you could give me some insights about it, please.
Alright, unfortunately, this situation is very common. But because we don't speak about it, because we've all been brought up in other religions that don't cover those subjects, we're sort of being closed-minded to these situations. Where you have people that are walking around, as you think, your mind, you create a sort of magnetic effect. Yeah? Your brain, everything. The reason why in relationships and they say certain words, I love you, I like you, I need you, all these kind of things, because they charge the importance. Every time the man thinks it charges the situation, it charges the story, it makes it more important. A man is more in touch. If a woman says she understand how to use the elements in reality to create certain effects, that they can actually create a magnet around that person, so wherever that person travels, what they ask to happen to that person actually happens to that person, and everyone they come into contact with, they actually